This is Decelany, and I've got a request for people out there in YouTube land, and that is stop ranking albums. You've probably seen these kind of things, exercises where you take a band's albums and you rank them from worst to best. I'm not a fan of these, and I've got a few reasons why I think they're no good. So yeah, let's get going on this. I'll break it down a point at a time. My first point being subjectivity. So subjectivity kind of underpins all artistic criticism, really. You'd think it's something we should just accept, you know. I like it, I don't like it, meh. I think, you know, we have to accept that opinion is subjective. Some people will like things, some people will not like things. I think where it kind of runs away a bit when you start doing these ranked lists is you kind of compound the error. Not that I'm saying there's an error. I'm just using that phrase generally. What happens is you just compound someone's opinion. So you may agree with them on one album, but then as they your opinions progressively diverge, that kind of error, that bias, that difference between you just builds progressively until you end up with something which is really not reflecting anything meaningful. That may work for you if you identify with that person in some way, or if you kind of share that opinion with them, but more often than not, that's going to diverge to the point where their ranking is effectively useless. Yeah, point 2. Reductiveness. I think when you start getting to the point of ranking albums, say a comparison between album A and album B, then there might be a very, very kind of stark difference between them. One of them might be a masterpiece. The other one might be, you know, a real stinker. But what happens when you start having to kind of reduce these things down to elements in a list is you just oversimplify. You flatten the differences between albums which might be kind of quite close together. You might have an album which has got 3 or 4 standout tracks, and then you may have one which is kind of a consistently good deep one, but which doesn't have the highest of highs. I think what you end up doing with these kind of cases is you end up flattening the difference between them because they have to fit into this kind of rather artificial kind of ranking system that you're building in to your appraisal. Yeah, I think a ranked list is ultimately kind of a pretty crude kind of synthesis of a lot of complex feelings and reactions to a very big body of work. I just don't think it works very well. Okay, point 3 in my list of issues. Time. Yeah, an obvious one really. You know, bands change over time. They mature. They often have different kind of identifiable periods. And the kind of music, the kind of albums maybe that they'll be creating will be very different in feel, in the way that they're made. The complexity, maybe the personnel is different. I think it makes it very difficult to rank, you know, an artist across the whole of their career with that in mind. Let's take an example that's nothing to do with music. Say you wanted to rank all Ford cars. You know, what possible meaningful criteria could you use to separate a 1920s Model T and a modern day Mustang GT? There's so little that you can talk about that relates them, because one is much more primitive than the other, and one is much more of a, you know, high-tech modern vehicle, that it becomes less about, you know, Ford, this thing that you're looking at more broadly, and it becomes more about, you know, history. Why even bother trying to rank them together in the first place? Yeah, I think almost by definition, if you're trying to rank the albums of an artist, you must probably have enough albums in that list to make it a worthwhile exercise. In other words, you're probably covering, you know, a large number of records and quite possibly, you know, a fairly big time span. Yeah, the nature of the way that music gets made, the way that bands kind of evolve, bands can change pretty radically over quite a short period. It doesn't have to be the Model T and the Mustang. Another example, an obvious one, this is a musical one, the Beatles. They went from something like A Hard Day's Night in 1964 through to Revolver in 1966, you know, Sgt. Pepper a year or so later. there's a huge creative leap in there, and I don't know if it really does that leap justice to kind of say, well, I'm going to rank you all the same. Yeah, we're getting down to the kind of nitty gritty here, I think now. I may have nitpicked about subjectivity and people trying to reduce things to simpler things that they can rank, but I think this is kind of pretty much the big underpinning. Art is not sport. Yeah, this is my real problem. Ranking albums like this, it just feels cheap. I think it kind of comes down to the fact that we're used to kind of dealing with pop music. That's generally what we're talking about. That's generally what you look at when you see kind of ranking videos. So we filter everything through this kind of pop lens. You know, what's popular? What's at the top of the chart? And we kind of tend to adopt these idioms when we're trying to, you know, in some way kind of gather our thoughts ourselves. Yeah, music is art. An album is an expression of artistic intent. You know, down to the songs themselves. You know, the sequencing of the album, the production, the artwork, just the feel of it. Yeah, you can decide whether art is good or you can decide whether it's bad. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But leave it at that. Say, I like this one. I don't like this one. There's no need to kind of try and correlate these opinions, you know, create this kind of hierarchy. Yeah, and finally my last point, point 5, validation. Yeah, this is a tricky one really, because you're kind of getting into the psychology of why we're drawn to these videos, why people want to watch these kind of ranked worst to best videos. My guess is, please feel free to correct me, that these are probably more likely to be watched by people who are fans of that music. You know, they have skin in the game. In which case you'll be somewhere along the kind of spectrum of your engagement with, you know, validation. Oh, I agree with this. I really like seeing someone say out loud on the internet something that I agree with and it makes me feel good. Or this kind of the other end of the spectrum, you know, the challenge end, which is like, I have very strong ideas about this and I really enjoy the kind of the frisson and the outrage that I feel when I see people, in my opinion, you know, getting it wrong. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. Embrace how you feel about the music you love. Be secure in those opinions. There's no need to seek approval by looking for right or wrong answers. Like what you like. Yeah, there's no absolutes. There's no winners. There's no losers. And by kind of trying to put these pieces of art into a framing where you're kind of definitively valuing one above the other, yeah, you're cheapening it. Okay, yeah, that's me done. I think I've said my piece. Yeah, I've watched enough of these videos in my time, and I'm kind of burnt out on them. I know it could just be a bit of fun, and you'll say, hey, you know, don't take this stuff so seriously. Yeah, I get that. But I would be very keen to hear what you think of these type of videos. What do you get out of them? Do you enjoy them? Or do you feel a bit more like me in that, you know, I'd rather just see people talk about individual albums a lot more. I think you get a lot more interesting content that way. But yeah, I could be the outlier here. I'm sticking my neck out a little. Anyway, yeah, do comment below. Let me know what you think. And I hope I will see you again soon on the channel. Bye for now.